When you're recapitalizing through debt, you're in a better tax position than you would be if you're selling for a long term, or it would really be short term capital gain. So that's kind of the buy box, and we're buying and we're sticking in that buy box in both funds, the income fund and the growth fund.
You're listening to Ice Cream with Investors, a podcast that is dedicated to teaching you how to better invest your money so that you can live a more intentional life. I'm your host, Matt Four, and it is my goal to teach and empower you to remove the roadblocks to your financial success.
All right, Peter, welcome to the show.
Matt, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Well, we like to start with the difficult questions here. What's your favorite ice cream?
So my favorite ice cream is anything with chocolate brownie, man. I that's my go-to. I can do vanilla ice cream. I could do plain chocolate, probably over vanilla on a normal day, but chocolate brownie, if I see that on a menu, that's what I'm going for.
Okay, I'm going to ask a controversial question that determines whether we're going to continue this interview or not.
Okay, let's see.
Are you a corner brownie person or a middle brownie person?
If I had to pick, I'm going to go with middle.
Yep. See you later, Peter. Good having you on.
Click. It's over. But we should get along that way, Matt. You could eat the corner and I'll eat the middle. I'm actually more of like if I really had to pick, I'd probably go with like the side. You know what I mean? Like I don't want that full corner. I don't want it all the way around. But I do like a little bit of that. What do you want to call it? Kind of crusty, side, that kind of thing. But if there's a plate there with the brownies on it, I'm probably going to go for the middle piece.
I like how you flip that into we make a good team, because I can eat all the corners and you can eat all the middles. I like that.
The sales guy coming out in me, but so before you hit escape, let's we can work together.
There you go. Well, tell our listeners, what's the scoop? What do you do today? Yeah,
so right now our focus is investing in what I like to call essential housing. So there's a lot of different ways you hear that explained in my book. Workforce housing, affordable housing, attainable housing, missing middle, and they all kind of mean a little bit of it. They all have their own kind of different definitions, and depending on what you're reading or what source you're getting your information from, people kind of use those terms differently but interchangeably. So I like to, in my mind, I like to just kind of refer to it as essential housing. And, so these, what I like to say is we're rebuilding essential housing for essential workers in essential communities. So, it's those types of areas where it's not necessarily class A, but it's lower end class B, higher class, class C, type neighborhoods and properties. And we focus primarily on the single family side of the business. So I think the supply and the demand metrics are really good in that space, especially in the markets that we're in. Historic constraints of supply, just historic amount of demand, even in this market right now. If you head towards recession, and everybody has their opinions there, data shows you tend to have even more people in that boat. So I like that for a lot of reasons. So single family essential housing is the space I'm playing in right now.
The good thing about essential housing too is when I first got into the space, I remember somebody saying, I look for rents about $900 to $1,200 in the single family space, because he's like, that's the largest pool of renters. It's too rich to catch a lot of some of the bad tenants that you see at the lower end of that. And it's where people are going to land when they jump down from their class A apartments. So it always made sense to me. And it sounds like you found a little niche there.
Yeah. And the rents for us are a little bit higher. That's going to depend, I guess, on the geographical area you're in. that kind of thing. So our rents, I would say the occupied value adds that we buy, which is a smaller percentage of our business. We lean more towards the fully distressed, dilapidated type properties that we can buy to get in at a very, very low basis, and then essentially rebuild within the four walls. We like that for a number of reasons, and I think we're going to get into them later, so I won't jump ahead too far. But I think that we see on the value add side, where when it's occupied, it's usually those rents that are $900 to $1,200, $1,300 or so. It brings cash flow in the door right away. But in the markets we're playing in, average rent, I don't think we've done a a property that was under 1,700 in a few months now. You know what I mean? So that's 17, depending on the size, bedrooms, things like that, you know, somewhere between 15 to 1750 is about where we're at. But you bring up a really good point, and we look at it more towards, we don't want our tenants paying more than 30% of their income on their housing cost, you know, and that's a way to look at affordable housing. When people kind of argue over what's the definition of affordable housing, go to HUD and look at what their definition of affordable housing is. That is probably the only one that really matters, right? And the way they look at affordable housing is you're paying no more than 30% of your gross income towards your housing costs. So that's your rent, it's your bills, you know, utilities and things like that. And a lot of people, unfortunately, aren't doing that. You know what I mean? A lot of people are paying a whole lot more than that. And I've used that data in presentations before. I don't have it in front of me, but it's like, you know, over 50% of people are in that, you know, highly burdened area where they're paying over 50% of their rent, of their gross income on their rent and things like that. So so it's good to depend on the area you're in, that kind of thing. But, you know, ideally when you're screening tenants, we like to be, you know, we don't like to see anyone paying more than 30%.
It's interesting you mentioned that. I've got a lot of multifamily in my portfolio, and I invest as an LP as well. And I've seen some decks out there that are like, hey, we can take it to market rent, and you're just getting excited, like, oh, it's 10% market rent, so they can raise rents and all that kind of stuff. And then you start digging to the second level question. It's like, yeah, but if you raise it to market rent, that's 45% of somebody's income.
Ooh,
that's just not sustainable. I mean, that might be a business plan for the next year or 2 years, but if you hit any sort of bump in the road, that's probably not going to be sustainable.
100%. Yeah, I mean, it definitely that's a tough way to live, and I think most people that own property understand that if you can be on the lower, if you can make the numbers work on the lower end of the spectrum, you know, your vacancy rate's going to be a lot lower. You know, your occupancy rate's going to be a lot higher, and you're just not going to have, when that time of month comes around, you know, I mean, you're just not going to have as much worry that people are going to be able to cut the mustard at the end of the day. Because with inflation over the last couple of years, people are just feeling it all over the board, you know, and it's so many people think about you know, in this business, they're thinking about the landlord's perspective. You know, it's like all your costs have gone up, construction, labor, you know, contractors, I mean, you name it, you know, everything's gone up over the last couple of years. And I think that's a big part of the reason why you've seen rents go along with it. But you got to remember, for tenants, they're feeling it all over the board too. You know what I mean? At the grocery store, at the gas station, all that kind of stuff. So if you can make the numbers work on the lower end of the scale, I'm just not in the school of let me press it, you know, but we're long-term buy and hold type investors. You know, I see why people would do that on more of a short-term strategy where they don't care so much about the long-term. You know, they care more about maximizing NOI so that they can sell it, you know, in a couple of years, that kind of thing.
So what markets do you all serve today?
Yeah, so I live in the Philadelphia market. Our office is in the suburbs of Philadelphia. We invest a little bit in the Philadelphia market today. In the past, we've done a lot more, but it's harder to find deals in this market. It's gotten a lot of attention from New York money and you know, other, you know, just local investors too. So we invest a lot in Baltimore, and over the last like 5 years or even more, we've invested a lot in the Baltimore market. It's close to us, so we're vertically integrated. We do all of our construction and property management in-house. So we have, originally when we got into that market, we would bring our crews from Philadelphia into that market, put them up, and they would stay there for a while. Those guys just want to work, you know, so they're happy to be wherever the work is. At this stage of the game, we have a pretty robust system built out there and robust crews built out. So we're investing heavily in the Baltimore market today. We do a little bit in South Jersey. That was another thing where years ago we would get a lot of government service government service entity product, foreclosures and things like that. And that was more of a fix and flip strategy because the taxes usually don't make sense to hold in New Jersey. But there are some pockets, and we continue to hold in the state till today. If certain product came up in certain pockets, we would take a look at it. But primarily right now, our focus has been in the Baltimore market for a number of reasons.
So where are you? So in Baltimore, you mentioned government product. I'm sure you have other deal flows as well. Where are you finding your deal flow?
So one thing that makes Baltimore unique to like Philadelphia or South Jersey is there's pretty robust auction sites in the city that a lot of product ends up on. So we have really good relationships with one particular that we get a lot of product from, a lot of deal flow. And then, what I'll call real estate professionals. So they could be licensed or unlicensed, wholesalers, agents, on and off market deals. And then we have pretty defined areas. What I like to say is like pockets of the city that we like for a number of reasons. So we'll do direct to seller marketing, direct to owner marketing. A lot of finding phone numbers and addresses of the owners and sending mail and that kind of thing and making phone calls. So a number of tools in the tool belt to find product at the end of the day.
So I've never bought from auction. How do auctions work in Baltimore? Are those tax auctions? Are they foreclosure auctions?
No, it's a regular. I believe everything is technically on market on the one auction site that we buy very heavily from. So it's there's a website you go to, and the property is listed, and there's a minimum bid there, what I mean, that kind of thing, and I get there's a other, where it has to hit a certain amount in order to sell, that kind of thing. And depending on, the time of day, I mean, there could be really good properties where they don't get a lot of bids at all. Other times where they get a whole lot of bids, what I mean? So it ebbs and flows a lot. But yeah, it's just exactly what you would imagine it being. But yeah, it's not a tax auction or something through the city or anything like that.
And how many properties a month are you buying, would you say?
It ebbs and flows, but I think last month we bought 12 properties. So ideally, if we could buy, that many properties would be great. But typically it's a handful. 3, 4, 5, 6. It could be as high as 10 to 20 as well. So we're kind of like a tortoise and a hare kind of thing. Because we do everything in house, we want to make sure we like to keep it that way. And we're kind of, it's one thing my partners and myself all get along with. We're kind of control freaks in that sense. But when good deals come along, and then it's the dance between capital and acquisitions too. So just how much capital do we have access to? Because we really like to buy in cash. So acquire in cash and then renovate in cash, and then once the property's finished and a tenant's in place, put long-term debt in place, so through portfolio loans, so kind of a BRRRR strategy. So it's going to ebb and flow, which is how much access to capital we have at any given time.
Yeah, I saw on your website that you all have a couple of different offerings. So first, before we get into this conversations, are they 506c offerings? Are we allowed to talk about them? Okay, cool. Yeah. Just for those out there that might be a new term, 506c, he's allowed to talk about them. 506b, he's not allowed to talk about too much. So with the debt product, that kind of made sense. So you've got a fund where you're basically, you said buy things in cash. When you buy things in cash, nobody buys things in cash. They borrow it from somebody else on a short-term basis, 99.9% of the time. And they pay an investor a higher interest rate just so they can be first mover on that property and go ahead and acquire it. Is that essentially what you're doing with that fund is buying things in cash there?
I like to refer to it as like our in-house private credit fund. So that the fund you're talking about is called the income fund. And we pay a fixed rate of return for a fixed period of time. It feels very much like a hard money fund or a private lending fund or private credit. You'll see it, you'll see different terms, essentially all meaning somewhat of the same thing. And a lot of times the way that those funds are structured, it's somewhere between maybe on the low end, like a 6 pref, maybe closer to 8, 10 pref. And then you'll see upside, maybe you'll make 11, 12%, as like an average annual return or an IRR or something like that. And essentially money's coming in and then the fund is lending to a house flipper or a buy and hold investor. So it's because we're the owner operator, we're not lending to anybody else. We just do a fixed rate of return. So it's between 10 or 12%, depending on how much you invest and the term that you invest for. And it feels like interest only on debt. So it's like, you take whatever you invest, divide it by, you take the yield that you're coming in at, divide that by 12, and that's what you should expect to receive on a monthly basis. So it feels like an interest only payment. And then at the end of the term, if you'd like your principal back, it feels like a balloon payment. So we structured that to feel like that. And that's a big question I get all the time is like, what do you, who are you lending to? Who are your, who are the partners that you lend to, that kind of thing. And it's like, no, we exactly. It's us. You know what I mean? Like, and that's what's different too, because in that fund, you're in a short-term position where it's essentially you're like bridge money. And I mean, your money's used for acquisition and renovation. And then we're putting long-term cheaper debt in place. But you are collateralized to everything the fund owns. So you're getting that rental income when those properties are burred and have, longer-term lower rate debt in place. Which is something you don't see in a private lending fund or hard money fund. They're never going to be in that position, unless they take a property back or something like that and maybe have rental income coming in from it or that kind of thing. But that's typically not at all the strategy. And I mean, it's more, lending it out. The only source of income is the interest, and then they're getting paid out through the sale or through a refi. They're getting recapitalized, that kind of thing. So it's a little different than what you see with funds that are typically structured that way. But I like it from the sense that we're in full control. You know what I mean? When you lend money out to somebody else, my partner Wade ran a hard money fund for a while. You lose control, and so you have to diversify in order to kind of not put all your eggs in one basket. That's an important question to ask, your hard money, your private money lender, fund managers. How many people do they lend to? Because sometimes they might have a very short list of people that they lend to and can get in trouble that way. But at the end of the day, you lose a certain amount of control. So you need to diversify. For us, we're doing all the management. We have full control over the acquisitions, the construction, the property management, that kind of thing. So I like that fund for that way. And investors like it from a predictability standpoint, when it comes to what is my monthly payment going to be, that's important to some people depending on their goals and things like that. And it doesn't generate a U-bit in an IRA account, in a self-directed IRA, which sometimes will come up a lot in hard money and other private lending type funds, because they typically bring money in and then they leverage it on a line of credit or something like that. And so it changes the deal, or they're giving upside, that kind of thing. So
yeah, you gave two questions I had, whereas one, do you have a warehouse line where you blend the credit to get a better interest performance?
So we do have lines of credit. We have two $15 million lines right now, one with DLP, and who's our primary lender, and another one with Lima One. So we utilize them a little bit. Over the last couple years with interest rates going up, when there was a lot of uncertainty in the interest rate market, we utilized those lines a little bit more than we never utilized them back in the day. We'd always just buy cash. But when it came to those interest rates going up, those rates on the lines of credit at that time were like 8.99, and it was like what you could refi out at was like up in the eights, and high sevens and things like that. So it was like, that's 9-month money. Let's wait and see, that kind of thing. So we've utilized it a little bit. I think maybe in the last refi we did, that cashed out our last, what we had on the lines of credit. So I don't know if we're actively using it at all right now. It's one of those things where it's nice to have, especially for like certain deals, where it's maybe we do some development as well, some new development stuff, and also utilizing them for certain deals makes more sense than others. But for our bread and butter, type of deal, and if we just have kind of a normal amount of capital coming in on a regular basis, steady, that kind of thing, then ideally we're just buying cash, renovating cash, and then recapitalizing through a portfolio loan, and that's a strategy we like very much.
Where have you seen? Well, first of all, let me ask this question so I don't lose it. Do you have any liquidity provisions on the debt fund, the income fund?
For the investor, like what can they do? So if you invest, there's a 9-month term, there's a 1-year term, and there's a 2-year term. And for 9 months, we pay 10%. For 1 year, we pay 11%. And for 2 years, we pay 12%. And we offer extended versions as well too. People always ask me, do I get a higher return if I do an extended version? No, because the way we like the extension, because we're long-term investors. So if we know that capital is going to be invested for a longer period of time, that's great. If not, then just it's that's fine too. You know what I mean? We can work around that, but it's one of those things where we work with a lot of self-directed IRA investors where they just want to set it and forget it. Prior to that, we used to do a 12% for 5-year offering. That was our second. That was like everybody came into the 1 year we did 1 year at 9%, and we did 5 years at 12%, and we had an offering in the middle that was 10% for 3 years. And it was like, out of everybody, like 1% of people came into the middle offering. It was like everybody split the sides. I mean, it was like 50-50. Everybody either came into the 1 year or they came into the 5 year. So we knew a lot of people liked that, and we knew the reason why they liked it. But for us, it's like we don't need to have money tied up that long. And we know if we make our payments and we do what we say we're going to do, most people tend to stay with you, and most people tend to add capital over time. So we realized, in this environment where things have changed a lot over the last couple of years, people now more than ever appreciate a shorter term. That kind of thing. So we decided we'll let people come in at shorter minimums, but if they want to stay in longer, and it works. A lot of people, I think, out of that fund, the vast majority of people come in for 3 years or 5 years. They come in for those longer periods of time. Yeah. And a lot of people, especially in the IRAs, they kind of like that set it and forget it mentality. So, and then at the end of the term, it's a 90-day redemption. So once you let us know what you want to do from a redemption period, it's not like at the end of the term it ends. As long as your capital is invested, you're going to continue to receive the preferred return that you come in at. And then if you say to me, I'd like to take a redemption, the clock starts on 90 days there. Ideally, from a brand and a reputation standpoint, we want to get that to you as quickly as possible. But we're always looking at what's coming in and what's going out. So it's the dance between capital and acquisitions and execution. So what do we have in the construction pipeline, new properties, turnover, looking at kind of the full picture. So sometimes we can get it to you that day. Sometimes it takes 30 days, sometimes it takes the full 90. So yeah. It's, but that's really the provisions from a liquidity aspect, for the investor.
Last topic on debt is, what are you seeing your portfolio rates at these days? And do you have multiple banks set up for that?
Yeah, we do. So DLP is probably our one of our main, one, and we're in there. God, what's the name of it? It's like platinum member or something like that. They have a name for it because we've done a lot of business with them for a long time. And even prior to starting GSP, my partner Ron was with them for a while. I think the last one we did was at like 6.35%. And that was just that might have been, what is it now? October. I think that was, God, when was that? In August or so. It was like around the end of the summer, and then we had gotten that locked in, because it takes a little bit of time to get the portfolio refis done. It's maybe not as quick as a one-off refi would be. When you factor in appraisals and things like that, nothing ever works as quickly as you think it's going to. But I think we're in talks right now with one, and we'll shop it around. We work with DLP, Lima One, Dominion's another one. They're out of Baltimore. I love Fred Lewis and the guy who runs that. Very, very nice guy. Just a genius in the space. And there's a number of others that we'll look to, and ideally we want to do a 30-year fixed, 30-year AM. If we can do non-recourse, that's great. But we'll do recourse as well, and we'll sign personally, whatever we have to do to get the best rate. So I think 6.35 was probably the highest rate that we're in at. We have some old debt that's it's unbelievable. It's in the low fours, but I think right
super
now
competitive for a portfolio loan.
100%, yeah.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I wanted to glean from asking that is there are different tools in your tool belt depending on what you're trying to accomplish. And I also would encourage everyone that was listening. Sounds like you have a great relationship with DLP, but you still diversify away from that.
100%.
I think we have been in a time where capital has been very cheap, very abundant, and very free to go acquire. And people forget that in 2008, and why Dave Ramsey hates debt is because he had a portfolio loan the bank sold, and the guy came in and said, basically, you have 30 days to repay all this debt, or we're going to close everything down, and he couldn't pay
Wow.
it.
Yeah.
So it's always important to have different strings of credit out there for different use cases as well as diversity.
Hey, fellow investors, before we dive into our next segment of the show, I wanted to take a quick moment to talk to you about a fantastic opportunity for you to invest with me. As you know, here at Ice Cream with Investors, I'm passionate about real estate investing and helping you navigate the exciting world of wealth creation through real estate. And that's why, for the first time, I'm thrilled to tell you about an opportunity for you to invest alongside of me. Over the past 3 years, I've been investing in multifamily, mobile home parks, car washes. I've even become the bank and lent out money to fellow real estate investors on a short-term basis. And now you can come join me. If you would like to jump on a call and learn more about this opportunity, head to icecreamwithinvestors.com/invest and find a time for us to connect. And now back to the show.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's different product out there too. You know what I mean? And I think that's one of the huge advantages of single family versus multifamily and commercial deals is the access to 30-year fixed, 30-year AM, type debt that you can get. You know what I mean? You're not going to get that on an apartment, that kind of thing. So it's extremely important. And to your point, when things change, being shopping things out there and stuff like that. I worked for somebody years ago who was really big on that. I mean, every couple of years he was insurance, lenders, you name it, anything like that. Shopping it around, not just in business, but in his personal life as well. You know what I mean? So it's a smart thing to do.
Yep. So that was the income growth or the income fund. Talk to us a little bit about the growth fund. So these are single family rentals that you have. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's the same exact strategy. What we buy, our buy box, essential housing, buying dilapidated homes. It's the exact same strategy. It's just a different structure. And obviously different assets backing it too, because we're buying, some assets are titled in the income fund, some are titled in the growth fund. I've been doing this for 10 years. Prior to starting GSP, I worked at a company and we had funds that were structured very similar to how our income fund is structured. So it was one of the reasons. It was the do what you know kind of thing, and I had great relationships in that space. So that was one of the reasons we set it up that way. And I knew people would be interested in it because we were doing something different from an asset class perspective, and this would provide some diversification in their portfolio, from an asset class perspective, from a management perspective, that kind of thing. But for 10 years, people have been asking me, upside, tax advantages, how do I get involved in that kind of structure? So a couple of years ago, we started really taking a serious look at that, and we launched the growth fund. I think it was maybe last year or so. And it's a 6% pref, and we split profit and equity 50-50 above that. So it's more of a traditional equity, profit type split. And it's but what the buy box at the end of the day is the same, and that's why I'll just run through that real quickly because we didn't talk about that. We typically want to be all into a property for about $130,000, ideally less. We will go maybe a little bit over, but we really have to see that justified in the ARV. We like the 130 or less because we could diversify over more properties. That's why we don't buy as much in like the Philadelphia market, especially like Philadelphia suburbs, where it's like you couldn't get into a property for, under 300, you know what I mean? And even maybe in the suburbs could be a lot more than that too. And it's just, at that point, the numbers could make sense, but from a diversification standpoint, we're putting as much capital into one property that we could have been putting across 2 or 3 properties, something like that. So we take that into consideration. That's one of the reasons we like these types of deals. And that's why we don't necessarily want to do $1 million flips or something like that. You know what I mean? You can make a lot of money, but you're taking on a different risk structure at that point. So ideally 130 or less, and then we want to see an ARV upwards of 185,000 on the low end, ideally closer to 200 or more. So on a 70% loan to value refi, we're getting almost all of our cash out of the deal. Ideally, we're getting all of our cash out of the deal. So that's one of the reasons we don't necessarily like to sell, because when you're recapitalizing through debt, you're in a better tax position than you would be if you're selling for a long term, or it would really be short term capital gain. So that's kind of the buy box, and we're buying and we're sticking in that buy box in both funds, the income fund and the growth fund.
Gotcha. Well, you're in the Baltimore market today. It sounds like you've got a pretty hefty operations there. I'm always interested in kind of how people are thinking about the next 3 to 5 years. So,
Hmm.
specifically thinking about like different markets, are you all? I'll start the conversation with: Are you thinking about different markets, or do you just want to stay kind of where you have a competitive advantage right now?
Yeah, I'll answer that question by saying it's a little bit of both. I'm always looking around. You know what I mean? And me from a personal perspective, I think it's important to take somewhat of an asset class agnostic look at the space, especially for investors. You know what I mean? As an operator, sometimes you can't weave and as much as maybe you could, as an LP could. You know what I mean? Who's investing capital passively. I come from the world too of I had like an apprenticeship a couple years ago from the commercial side of the business, and the guy I was with there, he ran a commercial investment development brokerage firm, and he would touch anything and everything, because he didn't want to be stuck on like, where it's the industrial, thing. And that's all we do is industrial. And when industrial's great, you're doing great. But when it's not, you're struggling to live, So he kind of built into my mind to take that agnostic view of the market. And I think there's something to that. Now, that being said, what I really like about workforce and affordable housing and what we do on the single family side is there is massive supply constraints, massive demand. If we're heading towards a recession, and who knows, you hear so much mixed reviews and things like that. It's only going to do better. If you look at the data, there's more demand in that market at that time. So I like it because it's not as secular, as secular as the secular, my God. It's not it's insulated, I guess you could say, from some of the craziness in the market, because the supply and the demand is so different than almost any other asset class in the real estate space. The other thing too is I like to say we take somewhat of a commercial approach to single family. So we look at it from a scale perspective. Sometimes people will ask me, when does the portfolio get too big? And it's like that's like the exact opposite way of what I'm thinking. You know what I mean? I think with scale comes a lot of benefits. Now, I don't want to be Invitation Homes in the sense that I'm being ranked, the worst landlord in the country or something like that. You know what I mean? They've grown so incredibly fast in a short period of time that the experience they're providing to the tenant is not always the best, and that is a very important thing for me. I don't want to create a monster, where it's like I'm doing great and the tenant's doing awful or something like that. I mean, that's very important. Something my partners and I all get along with, and that tortoise and hare type of a mentality that we take to the business. But in scaling in a certain market like Baltimore, getting the unit count up, there's a lot of benefits to that. And from a management perspective, from a cost perspective, you can hire, we do everything in house. I mean, you can hire great people. We obviously work with subcontractors in some ways on the construction side of the business. You can demand, a better experience and sometimes better costs. I mean, just because you have a lot of product doesn't always mean you're going to get a great price. I mean, that kind of thing. But sometimes you do, you know what I mean? So it's more from a material perspective, buying being able to buy in bulk at a discount and save on the cost of material, that kind of thing. So I see benefits to scaling within the markets that we're in, and being somewhat concentrated in certain markets because, multifamily is successful for a reason, right? I mean, the economy of scale created in a smaller place. And, being able to have in-house management and guys, if you're big enough, being able to have people that work just there all the time, there's benefits to that. You know what I mean? So to be able to replicate that in single family, there's something to be said for that. Now, that being said, there's opportunity in workforce and affordable housing all over the country in metropolitan areas, urban areas like we're investing in heavily, but in suburban areas where we own product as well, even in rural areas, they're and all over the country in every market, there's opportunities and there's demand and undersupply for workforce and affordable housing. So we've definitely identified other markets where we can continue to be control freaks and control the construction and the property management, that kind of thing, but we're just not there yet, and then I think too, diversifying into other types of product in the single family space. I mean, we're doing some things in the built to rent side in other areas, working with builders and in certain ways. I mean, so I joke control freak kind of thing. I'm actually one of the people that respect partnerships and understand leveraging people is very, very important in this business, depending on, what your goals are, that kind of thing, how big you want to go, that, I mean, but in my world, it's a necessary, necessary part of the business. So I hope that answers the question, probably a little bit all over the place, but I agree with you on both sides. I mean, I see benefits to both sides.
What are the other markets you're looking at?
So like close to Philadelphia and close to where we're at, Harrisburg, Lancaster, Reading, these are kind of city, metropolitan type urban areas, that are close to us, where there's a massive, we could probably be somewhat in our buy box. Are we really, even outside of that buy box I was telling you, we want to create 30 to 40% equity in every deal that we do. Now, we realize at scale, you're probably not going to do that, right? You know what I mean? As you scale up, you're not going to hit 30, 40% every single time. But you could hit more appreciation on the back end too. In the markets we're in, we're typically underwriting for like a 2% market appreciation rate. Now, that's nowhere near where it's actually been, even minus COVID. Even if you take the last couple of years out of the equation, which are somewhat crazy. We're in the Philadelphia market, you're probably closer to 6 or 7 over the last 20 years. In Baltimore, you're closer to 5, 6. And then when you factor in the last couple of years, it's been outrageous. I mean, I think I was just looking at the numbers of like where Baltimore housing appreciation was just year over year. It was like upwards of 14%. So that's one of the reasons I really like the markets that we're in, compared to like the South and the Midwest and some of these really big growth, migration places where people are moving out of certain parts of the country and migrating to, like down south in Texas and in Georgia and some of those markets. They saw this massive, appreciation over the last couple of years, but now it's the hockey stick type appreciation. Then it's coming back. They're getting, people, institutions and investors coming from all over the country, flooding these markets. Like I have friends that are, buying out in Texas, North Carolina, South Carolina, Phoenix, Georgia, Atlanta, I mean, you name it, from the Philadelphia market, right? And we're not seeing that as much. You see it more in Philadelphia than you do in Baltimore. That's one of the reasons why when I hear people kind of crap on Baltimore, I almost like it in a sense, because it's just like, I know there's still opportunity to be found. Exactly. You know what I mean? There's still opportunity to be found there. When you go into a conference in Miami or Dallas or Oakland or LA or something like that, and your Uber driver is like, well, I'm buying investing in a fix and flip in Baltimore, then to get out. Yeah. And it's like, chances are the market's baked in the appreciation at that point, and the interest, and your basis it's going to be tough to get a good basis. So I like to hear some of those things. I think we're contrarian investors in that sense. Where we're not afraid to go to markets where other people are, and find the value. And that's probably not going to work for every market. There's really strong indicators in the Baltimore market, from jobs, from the location, from just the availability, the demand versus the availability of supply, that kind of thing, the sheer affordability compared to other East Coast markets and things like that. So there's a lot of positives that I think people just kind of overlook. And two, it's in any metropolitan urban area kind of thing, it's all about the pockets. It's all about the micro. I hear people talk so much about macro trends and things like that. And, it's all about, it's micro at the end of the day. Real estate's location based, a perfect example is like office. Like I've seen, there was one office deal I saw a couple weeks ago at a conference. It was amazing. It was a really good deal in a really good market. But like, if you look at the macro, its office is horrible in a lot of ways. But, and I know like locally to us where I live, like if you own some of these office buildings, like right on what's called Westchester Pike, it's like a main corridor into the city and all, you never have vacancy. Like when we were looking for a space earlier in the year, we ended up at a really great, like kind of WeWork, co-working type center. But I was looking at different spaces. You couldn't find anything, it's just, now the large football field offices, Yeah, I mean, they certainly have vacancy, but some of the smaller ones in good locations and in good markets, I mean, that kind of thing. And that's another thing I'd say about like workforce and affordable housing and all. It's like it might not always be in the best Class A type location, but it's in a really good location for the demand. It's in an area where there's a whole lot of demand. So I think people need to look at things in different ways, but I think it's important to look at the micro, and where exactly you're investing and what the value generators are in that market that you're investing in.
Yeah, just because I want to say this on the internet so that it's published forever. If I had unlimited capital, I said in 2022, I would try to be buying every new office building in San Francisco, because you can't tell me that an iconic city like that at the tech capital of the world is going to go away. Like it's just mispriced right now for the problems that it's having, but at some point that thing will turn. So
yeah. Yeah, you don't want to be necessarily buying for today. You want to be buying for next year. You know what I mean? You want to be buying for the next couple of years. I mean, that's thinking more like a developer, in that sense. You know what I mean? Where it's like when the project's not going to be finished for, a year, 2 years, 3 years, that kind of thing. I mean, that forces you to think that way. But I think sometimes investors get caught up in the trends of the day. And it's the classic, like if you're reading it on Bigger Pockets or hearing it on podcasts and things like that, you're probably late to the game. I hear that a lot with industrial. And once again, that's where you have to be. It depends too on the market you're in and the supply and the demand metrics in that market. But like in the Philadelphia market, industrial 4 years ago, 5 years ago, absolutely white hot. You could get in at a very low basis. Nowadays, that's been cooked into the market. Very, very, very challenging to find a good basis in industrial in this area. On the purchase side, on the development side, anything, it's just been so white hot. So many investors are on top of that. And but you didn't start to hear it till it was kind of too late and the pricing was already baked in. I mean, that kind of thing. So.
Well, Peter, I want to switch us to our last round. We're calling this the 4 toppings. Our first one is, what is your favorite book, or what is a book you've read recently that's given you a paradigm shift?
I get asked this all the time, and I always go to Win Friends and Influence People, because that's such a crucial book. And I'm a fundraiser. You're selling the fund, right, and yourself every day. So that's an important book. That I think that's important for anybody to read. But especially if you're raising money and you're dealing with people and real estate investing in general on both sides, on the GP and LP side, it's all about relationships and things like that. So any kind of book you're going to read that's going to help you to have better relationships and think of things differently, ask really good questions, stuff like that is helpful. But I got to start thinking, I have such a gigantic library of books and I've read a million over the years, but it's just over the last couple months, especially, we've been so busy. I haven't read as much as I used to.
The classics are classics for a reason.
You got to be good at the basics. Right.
Our second is, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Wow, that's a really good question. I think, I have my phone with me right now. The guy I was telling you about before that I kind of did the commercial apprenticeship with, and he said to me one time, if you want to be successful in this business, just pick up your phone. And you'll stand out over 99% of other people. You know what I mean? And it's true. You know what I mean? So many people don't get back to you. They never get back to you, or they don't get back to you in a timely manner. Over the last couple weeks, I've had investors call me and tell me I'm putting more money in the fund because I had some money come free from another investment. And they said, it wasn't a bad investment. Everything was working out. I've been dealing with the guy for a long time, but he just, every time I had a question, he never got back to me. And this was different people with different investments. You know what I mean? Like I hear, this is like an epidemic. I hear this a lot, and I've heard it over the last 10 years. I've heard it a lot of times. And it's just, you get to a point in your life, and some people it's more important to than others. For me, it's very important. I'll take a lower return with better communication, and just a better experience than a higher return with a bad experience. You know what I mean? Like that's just the kind of guy I am. That's something that I value. So that's very important to me. So I think just picking up your phone, getting back to people. If you can't get right back to somebody, send them a quick message or something like that. Really value that. You know what I mean? I get valuing the deals, that side of the business. I think the tenant experience is extremely important, who your client is in that sense. But so it's pick up the phone in all aspects of the business, you know what I mean? And know when to say no, that kind of thing too. But I think, if you're looking to, that was probably one of the best pieces of advice I've received.
Our third is, what is something that you're most proud of in your life?
Wow. God, I that's a loaded question. I would say the experience that we provide our investors, and our tenants, that kind of thing. I think the way you treat people, and is more important than anything in the world. You know what I mean? Like you could have all the money, your health obviously is extremely important. But the way you show up to the world, the way that you treat people, that I'm proud of myself in the sense that I feel like I really do try to go above and beyond. I just saw something today on LinkedIn where somebody was talking about stellar investor relations people. And it was about like there's never too many questions you could ask. You know what I mean? And I know people, I'll never forget as long as I live. It was years ago. I was going to buy a car. And it was a rainy night. I was with my dad. This was a long time ago. I still remember it though. And you're buying a car, you're in the market, you're shopping around, right? You're looking at different cars at different dealerships, different deals and things like that. And we were there for a while, and I think the store was closing, and the guy was like, "All right, we're gonna do the deal or what?" And it was like, "Well, I'm thinking about it. I got to go home. I got to think about it. I got to run the numbers. Got to look at this compared to some other things and all." And he was like, "So you just wasted my time." And that I can still remember him saying it. And I was like, wow, like I would never do business with somebody like that in a million years. And like, to me, I've been doing this, where it's like, there's been people where I've been dealing with them for years, where they're asking questions. They've been watching, lurking in the background for years. And I will pick up the phone. I'll call them back. I'll answer their emails as quickly as I can or whatever, because I value that. I appreciate that. I am that guy myself. You know what I mean? Like, so I think, I'm proud of the way that we operate our business in that sense, and the communication and the transparency. That's of utmost importance to me. So,
yeah. Well, our fourth and final one is, if you could sit down and eat a bowl of ice cream with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Wow. You threw that, you floated that question out earlier, and it's been in the back of my mind the entire interview. And I thought to myself, it would probably be my grandfather. You know what I mean? I haven't seen my grandfather since I was a little kid. And, God, I'm going to choke up saying it, but it would be him. He was such a great guy and such a hard worker. That's who I would want to get a bowl of ice cream with.
I love it. I love it. Well, Peter, fantastic having you on. If our listeners wanted to reach out to you or learn more about what you do, where is the best place we could point them?
Yeah, GSPREI.com. Start there. We have a lot of information on the funds, on our strategy, webinars, podcasts. We've done presentations and things like that. And then people can schedule time with me too. You know what I mean? So don't hesitate to reach out. This business, like I said, it's all about relationships. So reach out. Let's get on a phone call. Let's talk. I'm interested to learn about, what your goals are, what your experience is, how we can help you, that kind of thing. So start with GSPREI.com, and then let's take it. Let's get into real life from there.
Awesome. Well, we will leave that in the show notes. And then, Peter, thanks for coming on.
Matt, thanks for having me. It was a blast. I enjoyed talking to you, and hopefully everybody got something out of it. And I had a lot of fun with you. So I'm going to go eat a bowl of chocolate brownie ice cream in remembrance of this.
I love it.
Thank you for listening to Ice Cream with Investors. If you like what we serve you here, it would mean the world to me if you would like, subscribe, and leave a review on your favorite podcast app.